Hi everyone, welcome to Houseplant Tips and Tricks. My name is Nick, and today I'm going to show you how to plant up a low-light houseplant arrangement.
This series is sponsored by repotme.com. Get all of your indoor gardening supplies delivered to your door from one place. Repotme.com has practically anything you need for your orchids, succulents, and houseplants, including handmade potting mixes, planters, fertilizers, and much more.
This arrangement is super easy to put together, very inexpensive, and makes a wonderful accent to your home, or an incredible gift, as I will certainly be giving the one that I make today away to one of my friends because I simply do not have room for another large planter here in my home. But what are you going to need for today's project? So first and foremost, you're going to need some low-light houseplants. So I am surrounded today in this vicinity by some wonderful low-light houseplants. The ones that I have right here are the ones that we're going to be working with today. So the 5 that I have for possibilities to go in my arrangement are this Philodendron Brasil up here with the lemon lime variegation streak throughout it. I have the Scindapsus PICTUS, or the silver pothos. I have this Maranta leuconeura, Erythroneura, the red-veined prayer plant. This golden pothos back here, or the Epipremnum aureum. And then last but not least, this one poking up right here is a Spathiphyllum, or a peace lily. But there are plenty of other low-light houseplants that you can be working with. A couple other examples that I have on this side of my little area here are Aglaonemas. So this one in particular is an Aglaonema spring snow. I have a fern, so this is an Asplenium right here, similar to a bird's nest fern. And a ZZ plant right here, or a Zamioculcas, Zamiofolia, but the list does not end there. There are plenty of plants that you can use. The main tip that I would have for you guys today to choose the houseplants that you're going to use for your arrangement is to make sure that they follow similar water regimens. So pretty much all of these houseplants that I have here are pretty on par. Some prefer a little bit more water, some prefer a little bit less. But for example, I would not recommend planting this fern per se with this ZZ plant right here, because this fern requires watering like every couple of days, while the ZZ plant only wants to be watered like once every 2 weeks. So you're going to run into problems if you have a situation like that. But all of these trailing plants, the Maranta and the peace lily, are more plants that don't mind a little bit extra moisture, so that's why I picked these ones today. Also, they don't look half bad. You're also going to need some soil, so today I'm going to be using the classic tropical and houseplant mix by repotme.com, which you can use code NICK to save 10% on any potting mix by repotme.com. I will leave a link in the description to their website, and if you click on the link that I have in the description, I actually get a small kickback for any purchase you make, so thank you so much. And last but not least, we are going to need a planter. So I went ahead and picked out this lovely terracotta planter for us to use today. I really appreciate that it's got a little bit of a rounded bottom. I think that that's going to look much better as an arrangement, since there's just going to be so much going on up here. Rather than just the typical tapered terracotta planter, you can use whatever you want, but I just think this one's going to look nice today. And of course I have a tray for it, but probably going to make some sounds. So I'm going to move it for now. However, we will see how it looks when the end project is finished. So just to get started today, we're just going to begin visualizing how our houseplants are going to look. And one of the most important things to keep in mind when you are making a houseplant arrangement is that you're going to need multiple different types of houseplants. When you are working with window boxes per se, if you're doing outdoor gardening in the spring or summertime, one of the most ironclad rule of thumbs there is to use 3 main types of houseplants, which include thrillers, fillers, and spillers. So to give you guys a couple examples of each, I would say that this peace lily right here, as well as this Aglaonema spring snow, would qualify as a thriller. You could even include this ZZ plant as well, because these grow very upright. They're going to be the star of the show. They're going to be the tallest plant inside the pot. You're also going to need some fillers. So an example of a filler would be this fern or this Maranta right here. Although this does have some pretty thrilling foliage, I will admit, I think this is classified as more of a filler houseplant. And then there are the spillers, which, as you could imagine, are the ones that are more trailing houseplants. So the Scindapsus pictus, the golden pothos, and the Philodendron Brasil particularly are going to be the ones that most fit that criteria there. So keeping that in mind, we're going to make sure that we include at least 1 thriller, filler, and spiller into our arrangement today. Speaking of 3 plants, I would say that another important tip that I have for you guys today is to use at least 3 plants in your arrangement. I find when I'm planting up a terrarium, for example, if I just use 1 or 2 plants, it looks very intentional. It's not even going to be an arrangement per se if there's only 1 houseplant in it, but just 2 houseplants looks very like I just put 2 plants in the same pot or the terrarium, and it just doesn't look up to par for me. It looks very placed. But I think the vibe that we're going for here is that these plants have just been naturally growing together for many, many moons. So we're going to try to recreate that effect. So we are going to start off by just getting an idea of how we're going to want our peace lily. So we're going to want to have our thriller plant in the back of the planter if this is the front facing you, so I have this closest to me. And then we're also, I'm assuming we're going to be using this Maranta today because I don't think we have anything else that classifies as a filler plant, which I guess technically Marantas are trailing houseplants, but these ones are going to have much more of that spiller vibe that we're looking for, where they're just kind of relaxed and just trailing off the side of the planter, versus while this will become a trailing houseplant, it does kind of hold itself up more aggressively. So I think we'll have this one probably placed directly front and center. It'll kind of just look like it's sitting there spilling out between the other cracks of the other plants. But I think this one, because it is so showy, this will make a really excellent filler plant and really catch the attention and quite frankly be the star of the show, even though this peace lily is going to be the one that's grabbing the most attention upright because of its just stature. Of course, you can just go ahead and plant your plants up without doing this little pre-planning that I have here if you want to have a little bit more fun with it and just follow your gut. But I just want to get a little bit of an idea of how I want this to look. So we have these plants right here. The Scindapsus pictus, is the blue and silver plant, versus these two both have some green and yellow tones to them. So I feel like we should just use one of these two because I think there'll be too much green and yellow, and we already have a really nice array of colors with the bright and dark greens and the reds, as well as these dark kind of glossy leaves back here. So I think that we'll definitely use this Scindapsus pictus. Put it on one of these sides here. I think I'm going to have the Maranta coming directly out of the center, coming right towards you. And then I think, because this is a little bit more upright at the moment, and this is trailing down a little bit more and going to give more of that spiller vibe, I think we'll use this Philodendron Brasil today. So I think that was easy. I think we got this all figured out. So we can go ahead and start our planting. So the first thing we're going to do is just simply get some of our classic tropical and houseplant mix that Repotme has supplied us with, and we're going to pour a little bit in here. I am aware that I should be probably putting a tarp down. I believe repotme.com has a tarp available. I will link it below if they do. The only issue I have is I don't think you guys will be able to see as well. So I'm okay with making a little bit more of a mess for the sake of helping you guys out. But at home, if you want to save yourself on the mess, you might want to go ahead and put some kind of tarp down. So I put just a couple of inches inside the planter here. And another tip I actually should mention to you guys is that, so I particularly picked this size planter, which is roughly an 8-inch in diameter terracotta planter, because these 4 plants, I guess, that I'm going to put inside it are going to fit nice and snug inside here. It's not going to be too tight, but more importantly, there's not going to be too much extra soil. The worst thing about a nicely put together plant arrangement is that there's just too much soil in the perimeter that's showing. So you just want to keep things as tight as possible, but still have enough room for the plants to grow. This is perfectly deep enough, a perfect width for 4 4-inch planters. I'm sure some of these are more rooted than others, so I think it'll be perfect. And we can go ahead and start off by placing our large plant. You can, depending on if this is going to be more in the way, like this Aglaonema could be a little bit more out in the way, you might want to do that one last, but I think I'm going to do this first because it's a little bit more upright and I'm not going to be like reaching all around it. But use your best judgment as to which houseplant you think you should put inside your planter first. But I'm really just not going to waste any time here. I'm just going to pull it right out of the planter. I'm going to leave all the soil intact, loosen up the roots just slightly, and place it inside where we want it. I'm going to turn it towards me and just make sure that I like the angle that it's facing at. So I notice that it has this leaf that's sticking out forward here. So I might actually want to turn this plant, and I think that looks much better. Keeping in mind that these leaves will start to face towards the sun. I know they're kind of facing a little bit towards the back here. I'm assuming where this was sitting in the plant store where I got it that the sun was coming from this angle. But as the sun starts to hit it from other angles, it'll start to have its leaves face the other way. But I think at this angle, these leaves are most out of the way and they can be enjoyed from the back side here. So next, let's go ahead, and I think we're just going to do this in the order that we started to put this inside the planter. So I decided to put this in the back. I'm going to put the Maranta in the front, and we're just going to put it right in. This one doesn't have as vigorous roots as the peace lily, so I'm not going to need to go ahead and loosen up those roots at all. I'm just going to nestle it into place. I'm realizing now as I put these two plants in here by themselves that I feel like both peace lilies and prayer plants are most often connotated with being funeral house plants, but hopefully I'm going to liven up this planter a little bit more with some of these more colors that we're going to add. So this house plant is smaller, so I feel like we're going to put this one in last. I also feel like since there's less plant in here, that it'll probably have a little bit less roots than this Philodendron Brasil. That looks very established. So we're just going to have to decide if we want to put it in on this side or this side, but actually I'm almost getting the idea that maybe I should just, since this Scindapsus is a little bit smaller, I'm thinking about just moving it over just a tiny bit, and then we'll see how this looks just in here. So this is just a little bit more off-centered. Definitely a hefty amount of roots on this Philodendron Brasil here. So let's just place this inside. I'll let you guys get a look at it before I turn it around and take a peek. Okay. I really like this. I think I want to get this Maranta a little bit more up front. But wow, I'm really starting to enjoy the way that this is coming together. The way that the Maranta is just kind of peeking out amongst these green leaves here, and it's really just giving it such a visual effect. A perfect filler plant, I will say. So far we do have our thriller, our filler, and our spiller, so technically we could stop here, but I do just have a little bit of space over in this side of the planter here, so I do think that's a perfect spot to just go ahead and get this Scindapsus pictus nestled in there. I think it's the perfect size. Alrighty, that filled in that space quite nicely, as you can see, and I really appreciate just that added pop of blue and silver that it gives. It really does add quite the effect, even though it's just a couple of leaves just filling in a little gap there. It will grow, of course. All of these plants will grow even more as long as they're taken care of correctly. But this is one that will also start to spill out just like the Philodendron Brasil. It's just having a little bit less of an effect right now. But over time, that's really going to fill out quite lovely. So I'm really loving the way that this looks. It looks so fantastic. This peace lily sticking up right here, and if it's cared for correctly, it could flower over time and give some nice blooms that just really stand out amongst the rest, as well as this Maranta catching the eyes. And these Philodendron and Scindapsus really filling out the space. It's really looking quite lovely. Let me just clean up my space a little bit, even though I say every time, who am I doing this for? It's just gonna get more dirty. So from here, we're just going to go ahead and get some more of our classic and tropical houseplant mix. And we'll just go around the perimeter of the plant, just filling in some space. I do not have a garden trowel, so I am just using one of the planters that I have handy from the many plants that we went ahead and used today in our arrangement. But we just got to make sure that all these are going to stay in place, particularly going around the perimeter and kind of using our fingers to just push down a little bit, as that is where the soil is going to be the most loose. And if you go ahead and water this and the soil is loose, it's just going to fall, and you're going to have some holes and gaps in your soil, and then you're just going to have to go ahead and add more. So just to save yourself that headache in the long run, I would do a nice firm job patting the soil into place. Not too firm, but just enough to keep the houseplants in place, that they're not going to move around when watered. And of course, one of the best parts about projects like this is that you can really do anything you want. You absolutely do not need to use any of the plants that I included today. If you hate peace lilies of the passion, do not fret, do not bother using one. Use an Aglaonema instead, or a Dracaena is another fantastic example of low-light houseplant that would do really well in an arrangement. I'm sure you could even tell a little bit more of a story with your houseplant arrangement, like maybe it's a more woodlandy boho vibe or more of a tropical vibe. I would say this one has a little bit more of a tropical vibe here. Or maybe there's more of a color story that you're following. There are so many things that you can do to make a houseplant arrangement that looks way more fantastic than mine here. I am simply just working with a couple of inexpensive houseplants that I was able to get at my local houseplant store that also are all low-light houseplants, since that is what we are talking about in today's video. But I think I'm about finished. However, I will say I think I'm going to just go the extra mile, because I can just see a little bit of soil in some of these gaps, like right here. And my one thought is that since this is a prayer plant in the front and these leaves are going to fold up and down while they are covering the soil right now, this could perhaps fold up and show the bare soil. So I think I'm going to take this product right here, which is also by repotme.com. So this is their extra small Monterey bark, and I will give you a close-up as to what this looks like. This is typically used as a soil amendment. I use this if I'm like planting up a Hoya or something that prefers a little bit more bark in its soil, but I also really appreciate the way that it looks. So I'm simply just going to take a couple spoonfuls, and I'm going to just start putting them around the perimeter of the planter, just covering the soil. Barely a layer. I'm probably doing no more than a 1/4 inch maximum, because I'm really not trying to hold on to too much more moisture. You can also use things like stones. You can use moss. Moss looks fantastic in a houseplant arrangement. In fact, I would be daring enough to say that that probably looks the most professional as a top dressing to use. The one thing to keep in mind though is if you are using stones, they can hold on to a little bit more moisture. So if you are working with, say, like an Aglaonema or a ZZ plant in your arrangement and you want it to be one that's more drought tolerant, I probably wouldn't recommend using something like stones. I would probably go more for moss, which isn't going to hold on to as much moisture. And if you have enough going on, you really don't even need to do this top dressing. In fact, this is completely optional. I just get a little bit anal retentive sometime, and I just really want this soil to be covered, and I want this to look as perfect for whoever recipient is receiving this beautiful houseplant arrangement. So now that that's done with, I think that is where we are going to wrap up our houseplant arrangement project today. It looks fabulous. There is a lot going on, of course, but I really like that. I really love all the different colors that are in here. We have our thrillers, our fillers, and our spillers, and they are just looking phenomenal with all of these different colors. Of course, I need to water this. I'm going to do that off camera if you don't mind, but I'm just going to go ahead and put it on my shower, turn it on very lightly, and just let this plant get nice and soaked and saturated as a first watering to let it settle into place. And then from there, a planter with this size and the amount of plants sucking up the moisture in here, I will probably be watering this roughly once a week, keeping in mind that the houseplants that I'm using in here, particularly the Spathiphyllum and the Maranta, are houseplants that prefer to be more on the moist side. So if you're using ones like I was saying, the Aglaonema or the ZZ plant, you might want to consider watering a little bit less, maybe more on the 10 to 14 day mark. I had a lot of fun potting it up, and I hope whichever friend of mine receives it as a gift enjoys it, because I put a lot of love into it, okay? So thank you guys again for joining me. Also, thank you to repotme.com for sponsoring this series. I will leave a link to all of the products that I use in today's video, as well as their website, in the description below. And as I mentioned, if you click on those links, I will receive a small kickback, so thank you so much. Also, code Nick to save 10% on any of the potting mixes available on their website. Thank you guys again. If you don't already follow me on Instagram at PHILLYFOLIAGE, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys in my next video. Have a great time.